Hello Commander community, I'm Paul the Commander Theorist, and I'd like to welcome you to another Magic the Gathering video. So today we are doing something super exciting, the EDH Tag. So I've never done one of these before, but I was tagged in it by MerynMTG, so I figured let's have a go. So let's hit that like button and let's do this. The first question is, list your commander decks. Well, strap yourselves in, folks, this might take a while. So, I have a Rafik of the Many deck, which is kind of my flagship commander deck. It's the one that I run that's the most tuned and refined. It's also a literal Highlander deck in that it runs exactly one copy of each card in it, basic lands included. Don't ask how it works, it just seems to function for me. It's your standard Rafik deck, it's Voltron and Exalted as a sub-theme, a lot of really threatening cards that you suit up with equipments and do stuff with, and it's my oldest and probably my favorite build. I don't know if I could ever take that thing apart, it's probably like my absolute favorite. There's my Seaton Croson Protector deck, which is a Druid tribal deck. It focuses on the really explosive power of Seaton's ramp ability, drawing tons of cards, dropping tons of druids, ramping up into huge things, and then eventually I drop Guiltleaf Archdruid and steal everyone's lands like a kleptomaniac on Arbor Day. I have my Najila Blade Blossom deck, a warrior tribal deck that really focuses on chaining those combat steps. It's a very powerful and a very aggressive deck, and it's really a whole lot of fun to play a nice tribe and have a lot of synergy and speed. It's probably the closest I've ever gotten to building something like Slivers, but I'm not sadistic enough to play Slivers. So then there's my Karametra Enchantress deck, which is pretty much the same list as Melissa DeTora. There's a few substitutions here and there to my personal taste. This likely will be transformed into a Tuvasa the Sunlit deck next week when Commander 2018 finally drops. For further details, please see the Commander Theorem on Tuvasa, provided that comes out before this. I also have Krenko, because after seeing enough videos of MTG Mudsta playing goblins, I felt it was finally time to test the waters and play a mono-red deck, something I'd never done before. I do feel like I might have cheated on my beloved elves a little bit by playing Krenko, and you know, we'll get over it. I think my wife has pretty much adopted that deck as hers because it's ridiculous and Krenko. I have my Joda Archmage Eternal deck, which is literally a Nekusar deck. I'm pulling a bit of a Josh Lee Kwai. It's very original, you know? I'm literally commandeering his strategy of using an arbitrary 5-color commander, and Nekusar is somewhere inside. Draw a lot of cards, burn everyone for it. I have my Ishai and Rayhan deck, which focuses on +1/+1 counters and the Atraxa colors. It's perhaps one of my favorite decks of all time. You know, creatures can grow really huge and things can get really quickly out of hand. I have a Nicol Bolas deck in the works, led by the new Flip Bolas. It focuses on card destruction and discard effects. It's pretty dirty. It's kind of Voltron-y, as there's not a lot of creatures in the deck, but we're still working on it. My classic Grand Arbiter Augustin IV deck, which is a pillow fort focused on making it really hard for my opponents to affect me and attack at me, and I literally modified it just to rush out the Solemnity and Decree of Silence combo and just be as unfun as humanely possible. There's my Nath the Guiltleaf deck, which is an elf tribal deck that also focuses on with some stacks-like abilities, forcing opponents to discard their hands and make it just an absolute miserable time for them. I have Galta Primal Hunger deck that I built for my wife. It's still in testing stages, which is literally just huge amounts of ramp into ginormous creatures, Hedron Matrix, and just good times. And I think that's it. I believe Hapatra's floating around here somewhere. I do have Lycia still. There is an Aloro deck, but I haven't seen any of those in quite a while, so we're just gonna footnote those. So what deck did I take apart and miss? That one's actually rather easy. I had a very sweet Grimgrin Corpse Board deck that was zombie tribal. It was slow and rather clunky, but I loved the flavor of the deck. It had Grimoire of the Dead, which is like my favorite artifact. I definitely think that if I can snag up the new Esper Zombie Commander, we might take another crack at that deck. I also missed my Duran the Siege Tower deck, which was an Abzan Treefolk deck I'd run for a really long time. I think it was when Professor put out his Sapling of Kolfanor tech, at which point I dismantled Duran to get some parts for it. I do regret that, just because Duran was so cool. I know I have attempted to build like a Surta Enchantress Infect version of it. It's something, but it's not my old Duran trees. What decks are you currently building? So, I have a number of decks I'm always working on. Naturally, with the Commander Theorems being a really big part of what I do here, I'm always working on some new build. At this moment exactly, I'm finishing up the framework for my Bant Enchantments deck and just waiting on Commander 2018 to come out. I did mention before the Nicol Bolas deck I'm working on. I need to find the rest of my discard cards. I'm actually working on that alongside my brother-in-law, who is also building Nicol Bolas. He pulled 2 and he gave me 1, so, you know, we're both going to try and build it and see where it goes. There's also another deck I'm working on for the channel, but I can't give it away just yet, but it has to do with tokens, so that'll be a surprise thing in the near future. What's your most expensive card? So, this one is actually kind of interesting because there's a bit of a story to it. So, when I was just starting college, there was a friend of mine who decided he wanted to get out of Magic the Gathering altogether. And he had a huge shoebox of cards he wanted to get rid of, and knowing that I was into the game, he just decided to give me the whole box. The problem was I was very much on the fence in terms of my interest in the game. I really hadn't gotten to the point where I devoted entirely to Magic. And so I dismissed a lot of the cards in the box because none of them helped my derpy casual elf deck. So, stupid 18-year-old me really didn't acknowledge anything that was valuable. But among those cards was a Sensei's Divining Top, there was a 5th edition Sol Ring, which both of them are currently in Rafiq, Umezawa's Jitte, again in Rafiq, and a Mox Ruby. Now, I was incredibly stupid as I foolishly traded away the Mox Ruby with the rationale that it was a red card and I didn't play red. If you could build a time machine for me, I would go back to the night before I traded it away, kick the ever-loving cookies out of my past self, steal it, and go back to the present day. Well, maybe also go back to 1994, get a few Black Lotuses to help with student loan debt, and then come back to the present day. At the moment, though, I think my most expensive cards in my collection are the Expedition Misty Rainforest. That's actually my wife's, but we both kind of mishmashed our collections. My foil Jace the Mind Sculptor, and my revised Savannah. The price gap between those and the rest of the collection is pretty steep. I think my normal Misty Rainforest is the most expensive after that. My favorite board wipe, that one's simple. It's Killing Wave. I used to run it in a lot of my black decks, and I had it in a deck that was literally solely focused on making sure that every player at the table was going to be put through the ringer with every decision they had to make. It was a really sadistic deck, and being able to ramp up that an opponent had to pay like 10 or more life just to save one creature, it was just so much fun. And I think that deck ran like 3 creatures outside of the commander, but I might have to try and put that one together again someday, but we'll get to there someone. What cards do I hate playing against? I'd have to say that I really don't like playing against cards that mess with my board state. I think the biggest one is Elesh Norn. Back when I first got into Commander, one of my favorite decks was my Risk the Redeem deck, and that was a token deck. And one of the things that token decks are notorious for is having very small creatures. And with Elesh Norn chilling on an opponent's field, it was really impossible for me to handle it, as pretty much all of my creatures just die immediately. So, come to think of it, with the exception of Urbrask, I really don't like any of the Praetor creatures when they're not on my side of the field. They're all really oppressive. My favorite and least favorite colors. So, if you followed the channel for a while, you'll know that my favorite color is green. I think my first real deck I built myself was a mono green elf deck. It was absolutely terrible though, but nonetheless, it was still elves. And my least favorite color to play is probably white, or at least on its own. Mono white just, it frustrates me with its lack of card draw, ramp, and it just really doesn't have a tribe that I care about that really doesn't acknowledge the lack of ramp or card draw. it kind of was tied with red for a long time, but now that I have Krenko really doesn't care too much about having like a lot of mana or having a lot of card draw. Krenko can function pretty well without either of those. At least in my playgroup, it doesn't really matter as much. But white probably is my least favorite color. What archetype do you wish Wizards would explore so you could build a deck around it? Squirrels. I want more squirrel cards. Next. And we're done! Yay! So that was actually fun and interesting and really makes me think that I'm a monster considering the kind of decks I play. So now I get to tag a few other people to have them continue the tag. I think that's how this works. So I'm going to start by tagging my friends over at Commander99. They're one of the channels that make really good Commander gameplay videos, and I'd really be interested to see what their results would be. Affinity for Commanders next. Again, really great gameplay with a variety of decks, and given that there's a few of them working on each of these channels, it'd be pretty cool to see who plays what kind of decks. BadWolfMTG, TotalMTG, Cybin, Nizahan, Mythic Tales. Gotta go for the Ether Hub crew and see what they think. And lastly, I'm going to tag Jumbo Commander, who has a ton of Commander decks, and it'd be really cool to dive deeper into mentality behind those brews. Anyway, that's going to wrap up this video. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video. If so, I hope you'll tap that like button. This really helps us out, and it lets other people know this channel is worth a watch. If you're new to the channel, remember to subscribe and turn them notifications on to never miss an upload, and I'll see you guys, gals, and non-binary pals in the next video.
Summer in the hills, those hazy days I do remember. We were running still, had the whole world at our feet, watching seasons change. Our roads were